I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the Funding and Community Investments Manager with the Seattle Equitable Development Initiative. I am joined tonight by my colleagues Dakota and Michelle, who will introduce themselves now.
Thanks so much, Julia. Hi, everyone. My name is Dakota Murray, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am also part of the Equitable Development Initiative team as a project manager, and I'll pass it to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Oon. I am the Real Estate Development and Program Implementation Manager for EDI. Nice to see everybody.
And if you didn't see my prompt in the chat, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and the organization you're representing. I don't see Jenna. Do you see Jenna? I don't see Jenna. Okay. And if you'd be so kind to mute yourself so we don't get any feedback until there's questions. Okay, so welcome everybody. We are representing the Seattle Equitable Development Initiative, which is a community-originated anti-displacement and access to opportunity program. Our main strategy is funding community-owned land and development, which we support through capacity building, pre-development, acquisition, and capital funding. We address historic policy and market inequities through investing in projects and programs that mitigate displacement and increase access to opportunity. I'm going to share a little bit about the origins of EDI because we have a lot of new folks on the call tonight, and this is the first time in a while where we've invited new applicants to EDI. But really, the program originates through community advocacy, like I said on the previous slide, related to investments in community planning that the city had made in deep partnership with community organizations, and ongoing advocacy around the Seattle Comprehensive Plan. And this was now 10 years ago that advocacy was going on. And so through that community planning, community real estate projects emerge and come together to form the Race and Social Equity Task Force, which was a coalition that was very active in advocating for the creation of EDI. And in the comprehensive plan advocacy, there was the coalition called South Core that was demanding a displacement analysis of the way that the city was planning to grow, because there was disproportionate growth that was targeted in Southeast Seattle and historic communities of color. As it turned out, there was clear displacement risk associated with any way the city planned, and so this coalition helped to advocate and join forces to advocate for a mitigation strategy. These are the maps that resulted from that original displacement risk analysis that was conducted in 2015, 2016. And we know we have kind of crafted our program to target investments in neighborhoods with high where displacement risk has been created through lack of investment or, lack of investment paired with new investment. But we also recognize that there are communities that are not represented in these maps due to kind of the historic policies and practices. And so we're not beholden to this map, but we do use it as the basis for how we fund in our program. The objectives for this presentation today was to first give you an overview of the EDI program, clarify our 2025 RFP objectives, communicate timeline and eligibility, walk through the budget attachments, and help you understand the evaluation rubric and review process. We want to leave as much time as we can for your questions, but know that they may not all get answered today. But there'll be additional opportunities to ask your questions. So the context for the 2025 EDI RFP Over the last couple of years, we've really focused on our current portfolio of projects. We have 77 projects that we've invested over $140 million in. But because the projects that we invest in take such a long time and the market and costs have changed a lot in the last handful of years, many of them have gotten stuck because the project costs a lot more than they originally applied to us for funding for, or other funders dropped out, things like that. So you'll see in the RFP design that we are still prioritizing existing EDI projects to move them into completion. We are here to walk hand in hand with our grantees to the finish line until they're open. We also have struggled over the last 8 years of our existence, or have been learning, I guess is maybe a better way to say it, about how to balance our mandate to fund projects early, and also kind of our public duty as public servants, stewarding public dollars to spend down our program funds, and trying to figure out how to balance that mismatch of funding and project readiness. And so you'll see that we've designed kind of an on-ramp into EDI through capacity building that allows us to work closely with our grantees to align their asks for funding with their readiness to spend them. We also know that there's an immense backlog of new projects that have been seeking funding but haven't been eligible to our funding pool for the last handful of years. So we see you, we welcome you into this funding application. And we're also a small team, and we're learning about how we can balance bringing in new projects while supporting the existing portfolio of projects that we have so far. So just want to be transparent with you. That's a core value of ours about where we're coming from for this RFP. This year, we have $24.3 million to award, and we've separated it out into 3 different buckets. The first 14 million are available for current EDI grantees with active projects. So this can be for project support, for capital and qualifying pre-development expenses, with a priority for projects entering operations by the end of 2027. And so this is us trying to activate the projects and support them to get into operations. And we will support those existing projects with up to $150,000, which is 2 years of capacity building, and projects that received capacity building dollars in 2024 are not eligible because you already have funding for 2025 and 2026. The next bucket of funding is $10 million for new EDI capital projects. And this is the first year that we've structured it this way, where we have no cap on awards, but we are setting a maximum of new projects that kind of balances the capacity of the team with the projects that we already have. So we're trying to kind of take on some responsibility in managing our workload and the reality of what it takes to support a project. And for this bucket, we are only funding, I will fund capital and capacity building, but it's only for projects that will be completed by the end of 2027, and where EDI funds will complete all fundraising. And so this is a pool of funding that is meant to fill gaps in shovel-ready projects, not to be the first money into the project. But you would be eligible for capacity building in this bucket as well. And then the third bucket is the $300,000 for new EDI capacity building projects. Again, we will set a maximum of 3 to 4 new projects, depending on how many applicants we get in and their alignment with the criteria. And we will be doing 1 year of capacity building for these new projects. And the idea is that we start to build this on-ramp from those capacity building projects into that. If you get 1 year of capacity building projects, you'd be eligible for the existing EDI grantees with active projects bucket. So kind of building in a pathway to EDI funds that's a little bit more predictable for grantees. talk a little bit about the eligibility for current EDI grantees with active projects. What does it mean to be a current EDI grantee? It means you've received funds from EDI. You don't have to have contracted for them, but you need to have at least received an award letter for a project. If you received, we had kind of an meeting the moment in 2020 where we had rapid response COVID grants. If you received a COVID grant, you would not be considered an active EDI grantee. An active project means that you have not yet entered the permanent operations monitoring and performance phase. So if you're familiar with our contracting language, means you're not yet amortizing your public benefit. We would consider a new project by an existing grantee or a significant expansion of scope, like you're taking on a new site because you're expanding your operations, that we would consider you to be a new project at that point. You would not be eligible for the current EDI grantees with active project funding bucket. And then we have prioritized alongside the EDI Advisory Board projects that are able to demonstrate spending down their funds by the end of 2027, accelerating towards completion or the next phase of their development. For the new project funds, again, we have $10 million for new EDI capital projects, and the eligibility for that pool is that you can either be a new grantee and or a new project or new phase of an existing project for somebody who has already been funded by EDI. Again, we want you to be able to demonstrate that you can spend down the funds by the end of 2027. And where EDI is funding EDI funding is filling a gap in your fundraising, and that you would not need to do additional fundraising in order to complete the project. Again, you can apply for capacity if you desire, but you're not required to. And then for this $300,000, we're setting aside for 1 year of $75,000 capacity building. This is really where we want to support new grantees that are in the visioning phase, that have a great idea, but just need that initial investment to get the project kickstarted. Another thing we have this year is technical assistance for applicants. We have 2 ways you can access technical assistance. One is through the general grant application assistance, where you can select a consultant from the list that is in the RFP guidance document to support your application for capacity building, or where you might want narrative support in your capital application. These consultants can advise on general application preparation, budget and work plan support, and reviewing for completion. And their general expertise is in grant writing or fundraising. The project scoping is the other type of technical assistant with a focus on real estate development. They can advise on general application preparation, review for completion and accuracy of the attachments. And this is really for the project scope, cost, timeline of the capital project components. And their expertise is in architecture, development, or they might be an owner's representative. Each of the applicants may use no more than 2 hours of technical assistance support, and you'll be able to select a technical assistance provider in the RFP guidance document, which is on our website. Dakota or Michelle, would you be able to post that link in the chat, please? We recommend scheduling at least 1 hour in the earlier in the application process and 1 hour at the end. This time is free of charge to the applicants, and TA providers are experts in their field and will give general advice about how to respond and review for completeness, but they will not write your application or give specific feedback on your proposal. And then additionally, just noting that EDI will not pay for application support provided by a different provider than the ones on our website. Or in the RFP guidance document, and they have direct links to schedule with them. in that RFP guidance document. And so you would click on the link of either one or the other categories and schedule up to 2 meetings with them. And they will be able to help you and answer questions that you might have, but really give guidance on a strategy for how to respond and review for completeness. Okay. And then finally, on the RFP timeline, we released the RFP on August 11th. We are now conducting info sessions and providing the technical assistance through the consultants. The deadline for questions is September 22nd, and Dakota will walk through how you'll submit a formal question through the application portal. And then applications are due on September 29th at 11:59 p.m. We will have a community review panel that will evaluate and make recommendations for who should be funded for this 2025 EDI RFP. And then the recommendations will be finalized by the Equitable Development Initiative Advisory Board, and finally sent up for approval with the mayor's office. Our goal is to publicly announce and celebrate our applicants, our successful applicants, in mid-December. And we'd be able to enter into contracting in 2026. Dakota, I will pass it to you.
Thanks so much, Julia. Okay, so this year we are testing out, there we go, great. This year we are testing out a new portal. We're using a new portal that a lot of other city governments have used for procurement. The City of Seattle uses it for a lot of procurement options. And so if you have applied previously, this is not that same portal. We've done a couple of different iterations of applications, so you will be prompted to make likely a new login information for this portal specifically. And so if you look on the left here, you can see our Equitable Development Initiative website that Julia was talking about and that we've linked in the chat. And this walks through kind of a guideline that Julia had given that overview of which portal you should apply to. So we do have 4 separate application portals. They're all through OpenGov. They're all the same mechanism. They're just separate so that we have you, apply to the one that matches your application needs the most. So if you look on here, you can see if you're one of those new projects that hasn't been funded before, or you have a new EDI project that's a new phase, you would apply for that new shovel-ready project. Or if you're applying for example, capacity building only, then you would be applying for one of those 2 capacity building portals, depending on which applicant you are. And we'll go to the next page. Thank you. So this is an overview of what it's going to look like when you are opening that application. So I have an example here of just the new shovel-ready projects, and I'm highlighting a couple of things that we'll walk through. So this is what it'll look like for you. If you look on the left here, that highlighted part, the response materials and submittal, that is actually the application itself. And so you will be able to scroll through and fill in any required questions, and you'll be prompted to upload any required attachments that we'll walk through later as well. And you can see like this first question here is we're just really making sure that you know that you are eligible and applying for the correct bucket. So we don't want you to have to fill out an application for the wrong one. And I've also highlighted the addendas and notices and questions and answers tabs, and I will go through those next. Sorry.
Dakota, yeah, can you move your mic a little closer? Thank you.
So, I don't know if I can get too much closer than that. I hope that helps. Sorry. Let me see if I can change my audio settings. Noise suppression. Is that any better? A little bit. Okay. Sorry about that. Do I need to repeat it? Should I repeat anything, or are we good? Okay. Great. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is the question and answer portal. I've got a screenshot here of a current other project that's open that has had somebody submit a question. So this is what it'll look like if you look on the right. When you submit a question, it'll be available for anyone to see, but you can submit it anonymously. And then one of us EDI staff members will respond to that question in a timely manner. And we do ask that even if you are a current EDI grantee or if you're a new applicant who already has maybe reached out to EDI staff in the past, please do put your questions in this portal for whatever application that you're applying for, so that we have equal access as other applicants might have questions, that it'll be great for them to be able to kind of see everything in one place. And These will be due by September 22nd, so please do put your questions in the chat in the proper platform, Q&A platform. And we'll go to the next slide. Great. So the other thing that I wanted to call out for you, anytime we have a change to the application or any of the material that has changed, it will be posted on this addenda and notices, and you'll also get a notification if you have already started your application. And as you can see, we have made a couple of changes already, even including this afternoon. We have updated one of the templates that we'll go through later, and so it'll post that for you there. So just be sure to keep an eye out for if there's been anything that's changed. We don't anticipate any substantial changes to any questions or anything like that that would change how the application process goes. It's really just kind of like small corrections to things or tweaks along the way, because we are doing our best. And I will go to the next slide. Great. Okay, so we're going to go through the attachments that we require for our application. So we do require for you to be a Washington State nonprofit corporation or have a fiscal sponsorship letter. So that means that you'll be asked to prompted to upload across all of these application portals to upload that articles of incorporation for your organization that you're applying for, or in place of that, you'll upload the signed fiscal sponsorship letter with your organization. And we are also going to have capacity building and capital budgets that we have given templates for you to download, fill out, and then re-upload into the portal. And I will pass it off to Michelle to get us going on that.
Thank you, Dakota. Okay, I understand that this slide is very busy, and to call out to Dakota's point, a couple of the updates to the portal involved this capital project budget sources and uses budget document. We have most of it locked. Once you do go in and download that file, you'll see a lot of the cells are locked, and the goal here is to make it as user-friendly as possible and to make sure that there are no accidental errors with the formulas, which can happen very easily with Excel with a file like this. So I wanted to make sure I had everything adjusted correctly, so that's why we uploaded a new version of it. But overall, what we're looking for from every applicant, specifically for the capital project funding, so whether it's a new project or an existing EDI project, is first your total project budget. So you'll see that first column there in the background, and once you see the file as well, you'll see that there. And then the amount, anything that you've spent to date. So for example, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see all of the different criteria and categories for each of the funding where you're going to be inputting information. So acquisition costs, soft costs, so those are any of your project consultants, permitting fees, etc. And then your hard costs, including all your construction costs. There's FF&E and contingency as well. So this is just a snippet from that file. It doesn't show everything. And we tried to capture as many typical costs for a full development project in this budget. You may not need all of those lines, but they're there in case you do need them. And what we want to see is a full development budget. So anything that you've already completed, for example, if you've already purchased your site, we would still love to see you in the total project budget, include those numbers, and then in your spent to date column, you would show that you've spent that amount. And then as you keep going through the columns, you'll see there's in the sources section, the existing funds unspent. So that's any committed funds that you currently have, anything that's already been awarded. If you already have EDI funds that have been contracted or awarded, any funds that you have on hand that you can use for your project, that's where you would input those numbers. And then the next column to the right is for the funding that you're requesting from EDI in this application. So as you tally up, going through all of your different line items, entering the estimated amounts for those items, that will bring you down to where you see the circled yellow cell at the bottom. That would be your capital request for this application. So in the application itself, where it asks you for what's the amount you're requesting, it should match that number. And then as you continue with the other columns to the right, if there are other funds that you have requested, but perhaps you haven't found out yet whether or not you've been awarded, we would love you to use those columns to input. We've got examples shown there where it says example foundation grant or example capital campaign. Those are editable, so you can put in the sources you've requested. And then where it says select option, you can select requested or future request. So we'd love to see, what you've spent to date, what committed awards that you currently have, committed funds you have, what your EDI request is, and then any outstanding budget that you need to fundraise for. So that's the overall goal of this file. Let's see. Before you go to that, can you jump back once real quick to the budget file? Your technical assistance provider, if you're working with a project scoping TA provider, they can give you guidance on this, but it's up to the applicant to fill this out. And then if you have your own file that you're using for your project, that's great. I love to see it, but we do ask that you use this version so that we're able to evaluate on a kind of level comparison with the rest of the applications. Oh, and one more thing before we go to the next slide. Once you open up that file, you'll see that there are 3 tabs, and the first tab is includes instructions. So that'll help you a little bit to know what to put into whichever cell and row and column. Okay, now the next one. All right, so that third tab in the file is the cash flow overview, cash flow projection. What we're looking for here is for you to demonstrate how the funds will be spent through 2027 to get you to project completion or into your next project phase. And so we're doing that on a quarterly basis. So you'll see there the yellow column is the Q4 2025, and then Q1 through 4 for 2026, 2027, and then another column at the end for anything beyond 2027. The total budget and spent to date, all of those numbers will be automatically populated from the sources and uses budget. So those you won't have to edit, and they'll be locked for editing. And then the goal is for your totals to line up and match at the end, so you know that you've forecasted all of the funds. And it's also a useful tool if you haven't been using this yet for your project to help you plan for your fundraising goals and for project accounting to know when you're going to need funds, to draw down, to pay out your consultants and contractors and what have you. So that's the cash flow overview. And we move to the next one. So for the capital projects, there'll be a work plan that we ask you to complete. If you could, there we go. And so it's just a very simple milestone document. We've got several categories for you to complete: site control, feasibility and due diligence, design, permitting. There's construction and occupancy, which is not shown here, but you'll see it once you download the file. Any key tasks or milestones, completion dates or expected completion dates, and the status. And that's everything for the capital applications. And then for capacity building, a little simpler, but you'll see that there's a budget file. And on the left-hand side here, you can see that. And we've got a few examples of things that you might include in capacity building. And then we're looking for your request for 2026 and 2027, if you are requesting funding for both years. And then on the right side is the capacity building schedule. So similar to the work plan that you saw for capital, but again, a little more simplified. But you can add, in this one, you can add more rows if you want to. If you have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of activities, you can feel free to add more. And that's everything for the capacity building application downloads and uploads. And I'll pass it back to Dakota to take us to the evaluation rubric.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so we are looking at a screenshot right now of all of the evaluation rubrics that are going to be shown across all of the applications. These are the criteria that the community review panel will be using to score your project and to eventually allocate funding. So they are all weighted the same percentage. It's all 0 through 5 points. And so it's the EDI equity drivers, and there's questions specific to these things, the depth of relationship to community, site control readiness, and project scope. And then I just wanted to call out, if you're actually just applying for one of the capacity building only projects, then the criteria 3 will actually just be on project readiness and not on site control, because it is not an assumption that you have site control for that. And then lastly, displacement risk. And this is kind of a high level overview for your eyes, but then also I'll refer you again to the RFP guidelines that's on our website that has a rubric for each of these questions that will show you how one of the community review panel members will be using those questions and guidelines that show what is a strong application, what's a weak application, and then what is kind of a middle application that hits some points but doesn't quite deserve that full 5 points. And you can use that as you're doing your application. I would suggest doing that because it has some really good questions and pointers to see, is my application going to be reviewed strongly by a community review member? And the community review panel itself will be comprised of a mix of Equitable Development Initiative Advisory Board members and community members in practice in the EDI realm of things. And we can go to the next slide. And we just wanted to bring the timeline back up again so that it's at top of mind for you, and really call out that deadline for questions being September 22nd and the application itself being due on September 29th. And we do suggest getting in there and getting familiar with the application portals. And then I, of course, would suggest maybe not submitting at 11:57 p.m. on September 29th. Try to submit it a little bit earlier in case you have technical difficulties, but please do contact us if you have any issues or foresee any issues happening. And I think we'll just go to the last slide now, which is just our email contact. If you have other questions that are maybe not specific to the application process itself, or things that you don't think are appropriate for specifically those application portal questions, you can contact us. And I think we are ready to break into the Q&A portion. So please feel free to let us. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
Feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, or we can you can raise your hand on the top of your Microsoft Teams. There's a hand raising. I can build a stack of questions. We have one question that's asking, can they assist with getting access to the open.gov site? And I'm assuming that you're asking about the technical assistance providers. They likely can help walk you through that. We also have a couple of videos on our website about getting registered with OpenGov. I think one of the reasons that we elected to use OpenGov is that it's the city's new procurement tool. So it's replacing the roster function for the city of Seattle. And so if you register for OpenGov for in order to apply to the EDI program for 2025, you'll also be able to connect with other city funding or contracting for services. And so if you already have agency service, you already provide services via another public agency, they'll likely be moving to that tool.
I just want to add to that. I would suggest, if you are going to utilize the technical assistance providers, that if you could refer to the videos that Julia mentioned on how to use OpenGov, that would reserve more of your precious time, limited time with your TA providers for guidance on either guidance for grant writing or guidance on project scoping. That's just a recommendation, since you'll only have 2 hours with those folks.
And adding on to that point, that's a great point, Michelle. I would say, once again, go ahead and spend the time with the RFP guidelines document. It really does flesh out any and everything that we've talked about today, and then goes in a lot more detail. So that is going to have a lot of answers to questions ahead of time.
We have a couple of questions. How many capital projects in the new category will be funded? we will fund a maximum of 4 new capital projects with that $10 million. And so it could be that we're getting a handful of requests for, 200 to 500,000 to close out a funding gap. But it also could be that we're funding at a higher level for a handful of projects. And there's a couple of questions and kind of flags that I went off in my brain as I was giving the presentation. A couple of things about EDI that are like core to EDI. One is that we don't fund housing projects. So we are a commercial project funder. We can fund the ground floor in an affordable housing building, but the kind of main community services that the organizations are applying for us are not housing related. And the other important thing is that ultimately the community-based organization that's applying for EDI funds needs to be the owner of something in the project. And so in like affordable housing project, we have a handful of grantees who have bought the ground floor condo in an affordable housing project. It could be that they're kind of a part owner in a partnership on a project, but they need to be an owner because that's kind of core value for EDI is that we are putting land into community hands. And so there's a question from Ian at ICHS. We're already in the construction phase. Can we request amounts that we have already spent? And Michelle, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to where EDI comes in, but I'll just say we cannot reimburse you for costs that were incurred prior to your award. Because there are, requirements. I mean, that's a condition of our funding, but anything you would add to that, Michelle?
I mean, other than that, I mean, there are a few, key lines that we have to hold, guardrails. But otherwise, the key thing for us is we're trying to prioritize projects that are shovel ready, that are likely to be in operations by end of 2027, right? So that's what we'll look for. And some projects that are, a lot smaller in scope might have a shorter timeline, a shorter realistic timeline that would put them in that category. Or you might be on a project that is already in construction, is just looking for that last funding to fill that last gap. That would be, that's eligible use as well. So there's a lot of like variety and flexibility. But to Julia's point, unfortunately, we aren't able to reimburse for costs that have been incurred prior to an award date, unfortunately. Oh, the next one's about the cash flow. I can address that too. So there's a question. So on the cash flow, did I understand that the last 4 columns are only for monies or funds being requested but not yet received? That is correct. Is it okay if since we have time, I can share my screen?
Got it.
Or
Got it.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So so those last 4 columns, and you'll see once you get into the live file, that red text where it says example, foundation grant, example, capital campaign, etc. You can actually edit that text to input if you've requested a grant from For Culture, for example, or another source, and you haven't heard yet if you've received the funding, but you've requested it. There's a drop down menu that you'll see that has requested or future requests. And so you would, in that case, select requested so that it would look like the yellow requested for this 2025 new request. And then there's also the option for future requests. So let's say in the cell where it says capital campaign, maybe that's something that you're still fundraising, for example. Maybe there's a future request and you are inputting, within that column, like those costs that you would like to cover with your capital campaign. Let's say, for example, one of the things, not to get into too much detail, but FF&E, so like furniture, fixtures and equipment, there are some limitations to what we can fund for those. Like in particular, like loose furniture, like movable furniture is not a typical eligible cost for EDI. And you'll see that in this budget that it's actually blocked out. You can't request funds for that specific line from EDI. So then maybe in one of your future requests for your capital campaign or fundraising campaign, you're inputting the funds there as to help you figure out your future request. I hope that helps. I know this is kind of complicated document. All right. So, Dakota, yeah. So Dakota, where do you find the rubric? You showed to us, and she's already posted it, the link to it, and then it's if you scroll all the way down, right, it's the last thing. But I know you're going to read every line closely before all of that, before you get to the end.
Rebecca asks, the EDI filters include promoting transportation, mobility, and connectivity. For the new capacity building bucket, would applications be considered that support visioning for connectivity to existing community-owned developments that aren't active EDI projects? Or is EDI only intended to support visioning as it relates to new capital projects where the application would the applicant would eventually be the owner of something new? This is a good question. I think there's a couple of different factors that tie into the ownership component. One is that it's a stated goal of EDI to increase the property that is being owned and operated by the communities that are most risk of displacement. But the mechanism for the city to deliver the funds to community to support that land acquisition or the development is through a contract that is secured on title with a deed of trust and a covenant. And so when we this isn't tied to the capacity building dollars, but to the eventual capital dollars. There needs to be a project that EDI has invested in, that the community owns, that we can record our interest on, secure our interest on title. So I know that is really like a lot of detail and complication, but I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we have a couple of examples of projects where where they've been addressing that specific equity driver. One of them we supported, like they are kind of off on a major street with poor transportation access, and they did not have a parking area where people could come to visit them, and it was severely impacting their ability to provide services. And so we supported them to purchase an adjacent lot to provide parking. But for the capacity building, I think this is a good question. Like, it's helpful to have more context before answering this question. And so if you want to either connect with a TA provider or post in the Q&A with some additional context about like what the project is or what the mobility or transportation challenge is specifically, or you could come off mute and ask now. Russ,
yeah,
go ahead.
Thanks for all of that context. I think we can follow up after this session and ask more specifically and hopefully get additional guidance. But I appreciate what you've shared. It's been helpful.
Russ comments that it doesn't seem like the link to the milestone schedule template is working.
Uh-oh. We'll look at that. And if that's the case, then we'll. And Russ, you're looking, is it specifically in one of the capital applications we'll check either way to make sure and update that link. Okay, thank you.
And then another question, does the recorded covenant have a time duration? Yes, it does. Right now, the time is determined by the amount of funds that you have. And so we um, say that each year you're kind of providing a public benefit of $150,000 a year. And so if EDI only puts in 300,000, then we're only involved for 2 years. But if we put in 6 million, we're involved for a little bit longer than that. So you can kind of calculate out, and that's from the time that you begin the services. Any other questions? Feel free to come off mute if you have questions.
Hi, this is Dr. Helene Wright from Five Generations and Two, nonprofit that is fairly new, located in Kirkland, but serving many counties within Washington. I received notification of this opportunity. While I am a very new nonprofit, I have many partners and I am looking to uplift a majority of Seattle. I have lots of resources and wondering, do I necessarily have to be buying a building? I did look at some of the previous projects and saw that it could help to acquire a new space, but really starting at that ground level um, and trying to get the nonprofit established. Is this something that would be a good fit for my organization?
Oda, do you want to answer that one?
I would say that for capacity building requirements that we have for our funding, we are not allowed to fund anything that is organizational development specific if it doesn't have a specific project that you're applying for. So if you were applying for, especially in the capacity building phase, you don't have to have everything planned out. You don't have to have a site identified, things like that. But we do ask that you have essentially some level of an idea of a site eventually. And so if you are planning to apply for a project, you know, you want to provide this kind of service and community, you want to fill this kind of need, then we can use some of the funding to support broad organizational development if it is specific to the project. But if you are not sure that you're going to have if you are in the phase of really just trying to develop your organization and do that original capacity building of your organization itself, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily the best fit for that. Hope that helps. Julia, please feel free to fill in if I didn't. Okay.
I think the gist is that we know that strong projects require strong, sustainable organizations, and so the capacity building dollars can go to support that organizational development and sustainability. We've had grantees use their capacity building funds to build a succession plan for their organization or strengthen their board, bring on a fundraising person or a bookkeeper. But ultimately, when you apply, you will need to be able to communicate what the project vision is or why you're coming to EDI for funding. It has to be tied to the project.
Okay,
But
awesome. So I do have several locations where I've been in conversations with partnership for taking over just like rental space. I've also acquired transportation. And the second question would be, so all of the operations are in place and ready to go, and all of the partnerships and our board is together. Second question would be, does the site location have to be in Seattle or just King County specifically?
I'm not sure if I fully understood the first question, but I do want to stress that we would not support you. We would not be able to fund you to rent out a space. It would really have to be an ownership project. And you'll see in the application materials that we speak to, like, how did this project idea originate? Why is there a need specifically for ownership of this space? Um, and how is this connected to a community that is experiencing displacement risk? We are limited to funding projects that are located in the city of Seattle.
Perfect. That does answer the question. Thank you so much.
With the city expanding to many unincorporated neighborhoods, how would we know the limits? Um, this is a good question. Michelle, do you want to talk about the SDCI resources or how you
Yeah.
might look for that?
There are a couple of ways to confirm the jurisdiction. One would be through the King County Assessor's Office website. Maybe we can pull up some links. Once you input once you input an address and get the parcel, there'll be a little report that you can pull that will tell you which jurisdiction it's in, whether it's in King County, Seattle, or another jurisdiction. And then there's also the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. Thank you, Dakota. Also has like a GIS and mapping. Once you input an address, it will either show up because it's in Seattle or it won't because it's not. So there are a couple different ways to do it, but the King County assessor might be the best place to start through the link that Dakota just posted. And if either of those you're unsure about, in the guidance document you will see contact information for someone at SDCI. I'm just posting his name here, but his contact info is in our guidelines, and he's only one person, but he does provide a lot of help and assistance to EDI folks. And so if you shoot him a message, if you're unsure, he can look that up for you as well. I'll find his email address and I'll post that as well.
Any other questions? Again, we will be actively responding to any questions that go into the application portals or to the general EDI RFP email address. Please do utilize the technical assistance providers, even just to kind of help you understand like which application to apply to. They're available through, I believe, the 26th of September. But I'm sure their slots will fill up the later you wait to access their services. And we might be able to increase the number of hours that they're available later on, but we'd need to know what the interest is earlier on. There is a transcript of the session. I believe you can access it in the language and speech section of the Teams, but there will also be a transcription alongside the recording. There'll be at least closed captions, but the transcription will be available. Okay, well, looks like we have a misconnection in the chat, which I'd love to see. And appreciate you all being here, taking your evening to join us, learn more about the program. We hope to see you in the application.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Night.